Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome again to Friday Drinks. It's a hot afternoon in Harare. I don't know how it is wherever you are, but it's sweltering. We're still looking forward to the rains. The rains are not here. You're a farmer. How are you surviving?
It's scary because you are not too sure how you have to plan for it. Do you have to start? In fact, or maybe you've already started buying inputs and putting things together. But do you put it on the farm? Do you dry plant? Especially for some of us who rely on the rains and we don't have irrigation on the farm. I guess
you were never part of our Command Agriculture.
No.
Why not? Free inputs, free.
Look, if it comes and you are on the farm, why not? Because I'm a taxpayer, right? I might as well get it. My pound of flesh. But it's scary given how many households rely on farming, especially using rain-fed rains, and even also for the fiscus, because I suppose the inputs for the schemes that we are talking about, Fumvudza and what is replaced command, were already procured. And remember, we were working with a figure of 3 million
households.
Yes, and those kind of high projections. So it's something. Fingers crossed. I guess if we get to beyond the 15th of December, maybe into Christmas, it's a done deal.
Yeah. Well, before
you shouldn't be a weekend farmer already. Like your prospects. I'm just looking at it as an analyst. your prospects, even in a good rainy season, bad. Now we're going into a drought, and you've got this horrible budget, my friend. Just walk away.
but you see what's happening. Some of those so-called weekend farmers actually are the ones that have got capacity to put investment into farming, because they've got access to financing, access to capital. The majority of the guys who just got the farms and they don't have anything on their balance sheet, they are not able to raise money. So if you walk around on some farming areas, you see people putting center pivots or the nice kind of farming projects that are shaping up. Yeah. It's mostly from weekend farmers like us who have got access to what to capital.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. And for you, I mean, you're the local alcoholic. Tell us, what's the festival mood like? Are people festive?
Can you be festive after such a budget? I mean, I've already downgraded. I'm going to drink beer today, local beer, because the budget is going to make all of us poor. And it's So
for the longest time I've known you, you've been a beer drinker. What happened? At some point you changed. I think the last 3-4 years, at some point you changed into becoming a whiskey drinker. But for the longest, you were quite comfortable with beers.
I still am. I mean,
I can count the number of times you actually drink beer.
But I definitely have acquired a taste for whiskey. And
how did you acquire it? So it's something that you can acquire.
Absolutely. Because there's a whole.
So how did it happen?
There's a whole universe of it. I think aspirationally, when you're younger, you actually can't afford whiskey at all. And the people.
That's the change that made. I started making money 4 years ago.
So anyway, the guy can afford some whiskey, so you can upgrade it away from the beer.
And so you just see, some of your mentors and role models drinking whiskey, and they seem to talk about it as well with some amount of erudition that just makes it even more interesting.
Okay.
And so somewhere along the line, you
pick up the habit.
Yeah, and it's become a thing. There are whiskey clubs, there are channels on YouTube, with influencers just talking about the different kinds of whiskeys and that sort of thing. So it's a thing in a way that it wasn't perhaps
10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a class thing in a way. So maybe making a statement that Ndashika, we have arrived.
Well, in certain circles, it's a class thing. I mean, I know some very wealthy people who have absolutely no interest in whiskey or wine, and they've been drinking beer for the last 40, 50 years, and they're not going to change. But yeah, certainly.
So what's happening to the festivities? I mean, usually end of November, bonuses.
Yes, the silly season. I think one of the major budget highlights typically is
What do the South Africans call it? Care December.
You have this conversation about the bonuses, the tax-free threshold, to accommodate that bonus, and everybody's thinking about how they're going to spend that money, and you have this mood of excitement and enthusiasm, and it's just not there this time around. I think before this budget announcement, already we had these headwinds where we're going into a drought. The global commodity prices are not great, and we're a major exporting country, so that's not good news. And then and it doesn't look like
okay, you're getting into the weeds already, but we'll get there. Maybe you can just tell us a bit about what you're drinking.
So this is a golden pilsner from Delta, local, and actually they're not that. Sometimes you can get cans, sometimes you can't. But it's.
Is there a difference between a bottle and a can?
So a lot of my friends will tell you that there is. Well, there is literally, physically. I mean, this is aluminium. A bottle is glass. My palate isn't sensitive enough to tell the difference, but some people will, are adamant that there's a significant difference, and they prefer one to the other. I'm not. My palate is not that good, I'm afraid.
Well, you've moved away from beer, sir.
Yeah.
What are you having?
Nothing sophisticated. I'm just having fruit juice. Apple.
Well, it might be affected. It's got lots of fructose, which they might.
I wanna come and start texting
label
again.
as sugar. And fun fact, these fruits and fruit juices that we consume today, the fructose content is actually much higher than it was in antiquity, when before we genetically modify them. So they unnaturally sweet.
Yes, lots of sugar,
and you have to. So if we're going to be fair about sugar taxes, we should tax those as well.
Thankfully, we don't have sugar in my tea, and
when did you stop taking sugar in tea?
Oh, a long time ago. When I think in my teenage years.
Oh, okay. What inspired that?
The taste of tea. I mean, sugar. It
so
takes
you did it
away.
for taste, because I stopped putting sugar in my coffee.
It takes away the taste, the
flavor of the tea.
flavor of
Okay. No, I quit sugar in tea and coffee because I learned that sugar is bad for you. Not, although
you're still consuming a lot of sugar elsewhere, right? A lot of your carbs. That's a lot of sugar. That's
another reason why it's a good idea to cut back on beer.
So I'm having an Earl Grey tea, classic, loose tea.
I like the box.
Fantastic. We got this.
It looks quite fancy.
From London.
Yeah,
and just perfect for today.
This is incredible
heat. A hot summer day in Zimbabwe. We have lots to talk about, gentlemen. There's been a lot of conversation around the budget, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of back and forth. I think that business and the policymakers sat and they gave us their view, and business has been, there's a lot of back and forth, and a lot of people are commenting. I think it's one issue that everyone is worried about, and I think that's not a good thing if you're a policymaker and people are actually worried about the budget and what it means for 2024. So I think that's the reason why we're doing this. I know you didn't want to for us to talk about it, but I think it's important because I think that last week we ended somewhere halfway. We had not even covered half
some of the issues for sure.
We actually needed to do, but we're going to do it differently because it's a rabbit hole sort of session. And how we're going to go about it is just really talking about going forward. What's business? What can business do? And what can society do? What can you do as an individual? And what are the threats and what are the opportunities? What can you take advantage of? And what do you need to be scared of? And how best to get around it? And I think that would be a useful discussion. But before we get there, I think that the one thing that's actually key element that's coming out of the budget and that's coming out of the conversation is around informalization. We've seen informalization as far as currency is concerned. So you have a parallel market and you have cash dollarization. You have also product of goods and services that are now highly informalized. And one key element that the government was trying to address, or that Treasury was trying to address, is how do we formalize that economy? And this is a conversation that's actually happening around the world. And some have alluded to the fact that they're picking up elements of what's happening in Kenya, where all listed or all registered companies, the big manufacturers, have to deal with people who are fiscalized. So who have their tax returns and have registered their company and they're tax compliant. Those are the only people that they can deal with. If you don't have a test, if you're not fiscalized, then whatever purchases is not tax deductible. That's how they've gone around it. And from our bureau in Kenya, we understand that it's very stringent. So you cannot trade unless you are compliant from a tax and all regulation. Where is this coming from? Well, a particular country that has actually done well, right? So this is just the prelude so that we just understand the context, is Mexico. And Mexico put a plan in action sometime around 2017, 2018. And what they tried to do was to encourage the informal sector to formalize. But they understood that there is no reason for the formal sector to formalize because they're doing well without being formalized. But there is an important element of that economy being totally engaged with the formal economy because there are so many economies that can be enjoyed. So what the Mexico government then did is to try and come up with a framework. And this framework is like the standard. And we'd like to go through that framework because I want to hear what your thoughts are as far as that framework is concerned. And then we look at what Zim is doing. Is Zim doing what's necessary? So how the Mexican government went about it was to encourage informal business, and they defined informal business as anyone trading less than $130,000 a year. It's a pretty high figure. That's some of our big companies in Zimbabwe. But in Mexico, you could, if you're doing turnover less than 130,000, you could get away with being in the informal sector. And what they said is, okay, so how do we encourage these people to join in? And they gave them a lot of tax incentives. So they said for the next 10 years, all these expenses are tax deductible. You have tax holidays. You have less stringent regulation, just to encourage these guys to register and to link into the formal sector. And then they also gave them concessionary funding. They also gave them, housing and other issues. So the idea is get these people registered. Then once they are registered, once they're in the formal economy, give them 10 years. It's perfectly fine. They're still trading however they were trading, but they are now formalized, right? They now are linked in the national general economy. Then after 10 years, the hope is you can now start taxing them. And even at that, it's quite clear at the beginning that in 10 years, when we start taxing them, it's concessionary tax. So if you're below 130,000, you're just taxed just enough. This is after a tax holiday of about a decade. So let's consider that to be the standard. So the question I want to give to you is, having given that the Mexican example is the standard, do you think we're failing? Do you think we're on the right path as far as tax and taxing the informal sector is concerned?
Yeah, so we're definitely failing, and the reason why I make that point is, if you look at the extent to which Zimbabwe's economy has become informal, this is not a development that was organic or natural. It's not like our economy has a predisposition to be hugely informal. In fact, for the longest time, we had an economy that was mostly formal. So what changed, right? I think that's a fundamental question. And I think that what happened in our country is that we created a framework for the formal sector that made it very tough to do business. So, and that created a perverse incentive for any informal sector to emerge and take market share away from the formal sector. So, for example, if you think about groceries and your big supermarket chains like OK and Pick and Pay, that sort of thing, in a normal environment, tuck shops shouldn't be able to compete with your big supermarket chains, because the big supermarket chains enjoy these economies of scale where they can negotiate much better pricing than a much smaller operator. But what we've done is we've created a framework with rules and regulations that's made the lives of the big supermarket chains incredibly difficult. So then they have all these problems that somebody in the informal sector doesn't have. So the informal sector has emerged and is outcompeting the big formal businesses. So I think, that's the challenge that we have at a national level, where we're saying we've got a framework of rules and regulations that stifle the formal sector. And if we just remove those rules and regulations, the formal sector will actually start to thrive and grow and steal market share from the informal sector. And we might actually, just by that action alone, realize that we don't have a problem where we need to bring the informal sector into the formal sector.
Okay, so maybe let me bring you into the conversation. I mean, I hear Ruforo's argument, but even before the current policy mismatch, the informal sector in Zimbabwe was 70% or so. That's the highest. I think we're next to Bolivia, according to the World Bank report. So I don't think that one policy change will wipe away the informal sector. It will be a significant part of our economy. Do you think that the Mexican Goto strategy is feasible in Zimbabwe? So this is accepting our reality, that our reality is the informal sector is not going anywhere. But what we could do is to get as much as possible of the informal sector to be linked into the formal system.
So our situations are different. So I suppose in Mexico, they've got a thriving formal sector. And the fiscus there is able to collect revenue from there to a point where it then makes sense for them to also invest in getting the informal sector on board. Our situation is we have got a dying formal sector. And if anything, the environment actually seems to incentivize informality. Because with informality, it means also you are avoiding the over-regulation. That tends to be a big issue for the big corporates. So dealing with ZIMRA and dealing with all these regulators that you get to know the day you decide to formalize. And then you see that kind of shift. But it's also because it's a forced kind of informality, in the sense that even people who ordinarily would want to be engaged as employees or in the formal sector are losing jobs, and they're having to do something on the side for them to survive. And when you look specifically at our retailers, you should remember one thing. The informal traders, the guys downtown in the tuck shops, at first they were not selling local products. So they were actually taking product mostly from South Africa, and they were selling it for cash and all. It is actually our local manufacturers who went knocking at their doors and say, guys, because they wanted the US dollar from them. And then they started supplying them. So when you look at the situation here, when you look at the informal traders versus the local supplier, I would argue that it's actually the local supplier who need the informal trader more, because these are the guys that are driving volumes and also cash generation. Because the moment you sell, the moment you sell to a retail chain, they want to pay you in Zim dollars at official rate, and maybe some 3-4 weeks down. So the informality that we have here was not created.
So you're agreeing with Ruforo that
it's a difficult one. I think what we need to do is actually to focus on making the economy work for the formal businesses and all. Then maybe you can try and then support the informal sector around formality. So, for example, it's there are downstream kind of trading routes for some of the big players. But to think that maybe on their own they will be able to be the anchor, you always have problems.
Okay, so let me characterize your arguments, both your arguments, because you seem to be in an agreement. So let me characterize it this way. You're saying that there are fundamental problems that we have, and it's a misdiagnosis to use examples whether Kenya or Mexico or anywhere else in the world to think that you can resolve the informalization of our market. The key issue is we need to address the macroeconomic situation. If you address the macroeconomic situation, the way our economy is structured is everybody. It then addresses the core.
So there's a fundamental difference as well between our economy and Kenya or Mexico, which is that our economy is a cash economy, right? So even in the formal sector, there's not a lot of credit or leverage available, right? If you look at the bank lending in this country over the last 10, 20 years, it's literally been shrinking in real terms, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I think one of the major drivers of formalization in economies all over the world is access to credit, leverage, right? You can grow your business by having a conversation with your banker. You want to, unlock a loan and match it with your cash flows. You can't do that in a cash economy. So that's a major incentive for somebody who's informal to formalize. If you hear that your buddy who did it, 3 months later the bank called him and said, "Hey, are you doing maximum amount of business or do you have capital constraints? Here's a loan to help you improve your
business,
your
working capital."
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of people would switch from
formalize.
If they could benefit from. But right now, in the Zimbabwean context, when people think about the banking sector, it's a liability, right? We're literally being told
bank charges and transaction fees.
Your cash in your safe deposit box might be raided, right?
And your bank balances are depleting on
in real terms.
Yeah, real terms.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is looked at with trepidation. It's not actually, so you're not backward if you don't have a bank account and just trade in cash. That's actually where everybody wants to be. And I think it's that fundamental.
So maybe what we're saying is to the policymaker, maybe address that. Address the fact that we're a cash economy. Address the fact that our banking sector, when you look at loans and advances, are less than $1 billion now. Yeah. Address that, because if you address that, then the informal sector, everybody would naturally formalize according to what the banks require. If I'm an informal trader and I knew I could get a bank loan, I would.
Absolutely. And you've got to think about it.
And that's a better way of actually formalizing.
From the perspective of the National Mattress Bank, who actually wants the hana and headache of buying a safe and figuring out how to keep your cash and manage it, right? If I think all of us would
Rufaro, you might be behind. People are now crossing the border and just walking into a Zambian or Botswanian bank and opening an account, or a South African bank.
Yeah, but
you don't need a cash box. You don't need the mattress.
But that's still a hana that you collect a certain amount of cash.
There are people who are doing it,
and
there are people who can do it on your behalf.
Yes, but if we had a
they can open their account for you.
Yeah.
While you're here, it will take 5 minutes, and they will deposit the cash for you, and you can transfer, and you can start transferring, transacting using your app.
But that's
so you don't need a cash box. The world has evolved.
No, I hear you. But what I'm saying is, if you have the right policy framework in Zim, there's no way somebody offering such a service should be able to compete with a licensed bank that's here.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that?
Especially if your bank can actually provide you an opportunity for leverage that Rufaro is talking about. And because I think some of the informal businesses actually, they probably aspire to grow. And you can
everybody wants to make more money.
You can grow up to a certain level just using your own internal resources. And quite a number of them, the traders on the informal side, they actually are resorting to loan sharks, Shimbadzo, where you make some arrangement to say, no, I'll pay you in 2 weeks' time because my margins and things like that are huge. So if you create an environment where they're able to get capital and they can do their business without too much compliance burden, because that's the biggest problem. The reason why even it becomes difficult to really formalize is, you don't want to bring a Zimra onto your shows, because the moment they come, they really would come.
They're out to destroy.
Exactly. They are not there to build your business or to make sure that you comply over time. They are starting to demand this kind of thing. So it becomes a burden that we didn't have before.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the biggest.
So I think what is coming out of here, and this is directly to the policymaker, is the problem with Zimbabwe. It's the dislocation of the monetary system. So unless we address that elephant in the room, that our monetary system is not conducive for formalization of business. And that's why we're a cash economy. And because we're a cash economy, that is what is resulting into the informalization of the market, which is quite different from what Kenya financial markets work. Mexico financial markets work. Here financial system and the monetary system does not work. There's a lot of instability. And because of that instability, it's just then very difficult for people to formalize. Because I hear what both of you are actually saying, and this is what we're also saying to the policymaker, is if you think about it, the bank's stringent requirements for loans are more than what government requires. And the easiest way of getting the informal sector to be formalized and to be within the regulatory environment or the regulatory system, the best way of going about it is financial inclusion. Absolutely. Get these people, if the banking sector was performing as is standard elsewhere, then it will be easier to get these people to be formalized. But if the monetary system is unstable, then it's just not going to happen. We can try everything that we can try. We can look at different frameworks, and it will just not work. Have I captured you correctly?
Absolutely. And the tax base will actually grow massively. One of the examples that I love from Kenya is, and I think it's a missed opportunity for us here in Zim, because they were struggling to collect taxes from combis. They woke up one day and said, look, you know what? The combis can't handle cash anymore. If you want to be licensed as a combi, you have to have a mobile money account. And that's the only way that customers can pay you. If we raid you and you find you with cash, we're going to confiscate it and we're going to fine you very harshly. And so all of these guys have an account, a mobile wallet, and that's where all the revenue goes. And the government has a presumptive tax for...
It's easier for government to actually collect tax.
So, it's impossible to evade.
So the kundit is the financial system. And if the financial system is shrinking and unable to grow, then it's just going to be very difficult.
Exactly. And another example from Kenya, the average citizen, you can actually, if you want to save, you can actually buy...
government bonds
from your mobile phone in very small ticket sizes, right? You can buy $5 worth or $10 worth or $100 worth of a government bond and start earning interest. And so that's possible because they've got the infrastructure. We have the infrastructure here too. But what they have that we don't have is trust, right?
Yeah.
That if I buy a 90-day instrument,
it'll just lose value unless
the purchasing power of I'm going to earn real interest. Okay. And that trust is not there.
Yeah. Okay, so it's clear it's not going to work.
Yeah,
it's actually not going to work.
There's actually no reason to appear to be heavy-handed on the informal sector because it was actually providing some sort of a buffer. Just imagine if all these people that are out of jobs that are trained in one thing or another didn't resort to a hustle and they were sort of clamoring to be in the specific job that they trained for, the chaos, the social unrest, and that kind of thing. So it's actually providing a buffer. And it was actually becoming more helpful even to the formal businesses, as I've alluded already, that when they started, this cross-border trading has always been there, where people are crossing into Messina and bringing groceries and selling them. But it wasn't benefiting the local companies directly. At a time when the sales on the shops were not coming through. Why? Because of these distorted exchange rates that we're having to sell in Zim dollars at a certain exchange rate, and then become very difficult. So the informal sector sort of absorbed that pressure, So
it was actually a good thing.
It was a good thing
that the formal formal manufacturers were now getting part of this cash, because this cash was actually going to South Africa.
Exactly. So ordinarily that cash would go to South Africa, and actually cash is circulating here, like what our friend would say, Marilu Tenderera, Chota. So Marianga is to Tenderera on the informal side, and it was actually now finding its way into the formal sector. And
eventually finding its way to the Zimra.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now they have actually upset that channel, that process. So if it happens that the formal businesses are sticking to that regulation, these guys won't have problems. It's not like the tax shops will close. They won't close.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You'll see more South African product.
Well, not just South African. Yeah. This is a good point that Tlanga is raising. That if you look at the circular flow of money, well, although these guys were unregistered, but they were, when the manufacturers started targeting that business, they were taking money away from Messina and bringing it back to Zim.
Yes.
And these people were actually consuming Zim products,
Absolutely.
Which is actually a good thing. And this is an interesting bit now, is that when you look at what's happened with Botswana, where Botswana is now allowed us to just use our IDs to cross the border, Botswana is not doing it out of the goodness of their heart, right? They're doing it because they see that there's a lot of consumption, that the informalized market will now cross the border. Instead of going to Messina, a lot of, especially the southern region, will naturally go to Francistown and buy Botswanan product. Now, we're shooting ourselves in the foot if now you're requiring our local manufacturers that they can only trade with those that are registered, the small traders that are registered. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Oh, that's not going to work. It's you're creating an incentive because you're forcing somebody to formalize and be less profitable, right? So there'll always be the incentive for somebody to be an illegal informal trader, and they'll figure out how to get the stock out of the manufacturer one way or the other. So that's not really solving the problem. And I think, so that's not going to work. And also, the other question that perhaps we need to address is we've introduced all these taxes, right? And if you think about tax from the government's perspective, it's revenue, right? And why do you need revenue? Because on the other side of your income statement, you have expenses, right? And I think one of the biggest missed opportunities of this budget is to actually look at that expense side of the equation and then introspect and ask critically, should we be spending money on all these things? Does it make sense? Is it in our interest? Can we not cut our costs?
That conversation didn't even enter. The minister, that was like a closed door altogether. He didn't even cut anything.
It sounded like someone was told that we want more money. You see, do whatever you can do. Just bring us more money. So not only are they happy, comfortable with the current expenditure basket or size, I see people that wants to just take it to another level.
They want to spend more.
They want to spend more.
Yeah, and some of the spending makes sense.
Is it not ironical because the current Professor Mtuli came on board with this idea of austerity? Have we forgotten?
No, we haven't forgotten.
It was an outsider then. I think that was just his pitch to get the job. So now he's there. He got the job and probably was told like, my guy, don't worry. This is how we do things here.
I mean, he had a tagline: austerity for prosperity.
Yeah.
Because he understood, as an economist, he understood that, you know what, if we cut government expenditure, what we do is more money in people's pockets.
Yes.
More people saving. And if more people are saving and they've got money in their pockets, they're consuming and they're investing. That's how the economy grows. Austerity for prosperity. We've forgotten that mantra.
Yes, and also one of the things that has put us in this bind that we're in, fiscal bind, is if you look at what we've done in infrastructure, right? We've built all these roads, and we've built this, or we've spent quite a bit on making the airport better, which is fantastic. But these are long-term investments that should be funded with long-term money, right? The idea that you can collect revenue, and fund long-term projects out of pocket the way we're doing, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You actually, if
it's a serious mismatch.
Yes, if an infrastructure project has a useful life of 50 years, 100 years, you actually want to raise money that is 50 years or 100 years to fund it. And we seem to think that we can just fund it out of pocket, and that's not going to work.
What do you do if you are under sanctions and you can't access international capital? That's the question.
That's a myth. This idea that
Chinese, the Indians, Afreximbank, there are lots of people who are willing to give us money, but they are holding back as well.
Yes,
because again, the elephant in the room: macroeconomic instability, uncertainty in the market.
Actually, it's not even macroeconomic instability when it comes to our debt and our incapacity to raise money. It's indiscipline, right?
We're just given not to
because if we just decided that, we're going to commit 20% of revenue to debt repayments, in 3-4 years we wouldn't be in arrears. Right? And we could restructure the whole
it entails cutting expenditure also.
Wow.
And that's the problem.
I didn't realize that actually that culture is now permeating into the private sector as well.
Okay, explain.
So recently I was talking to a colleague who represents a foreign fund based out of some European country. And they were at pains trying to explain to me how they felt in some of the investee companies, and you are saying, Ranga, I think our people actually don't believe in paying back anymore. You put money into a project, and there are these controlling shareholders that are there. You are agreeing on how it has to be repaid back, and the next day you find the coffers are empty. There were no signs, and I could feel the emotions of that specific person.
But is that not a result of the underlying fundamentals? I mean, we've had currency changes, and that destroys whatever capital.
It does, but I think where I sort of differ, where I think maybe it's more than that, is if you were to really do some investigation on the personal balance sheet of the proprietors, they don't feel that pinch. So basically, wealth has been transferred from the business to these individuals. Why? Because we've got all these experiences and history of
self-interest. Self-interest is such that you protect yourself first before you protect the legal persona. That's the business.
Yes. But what it does is it actually closes doors even to some of those
for private sector
to get capital, even from those Buccaneer capital you always talk about, who had taken a plunge and say, you know what, Zim is not credit rated as a sovereign, but I'll go in there and look for a specific.
So they're not even making money.
They're not from there.
Okay, gentlemen, let's veer and take a segue into what business can actually do. So we know the framework that we're now operating in. I hear a lot of people who think that government is going to listen and they're going to, wish away a lot of these taxes. But I think that these taxes will be with us. And this is just the beginning. It's actually going to get worse. I think that the wealth tax will start at 1%. but it will get to 5-10% very, very, very soon because there's actually not that much wealth to collect from. But once you feed this chikwambo, it just needs to be fed and fed.
Growing.
And it will go all the way from 100,000 to 50 to 20 to like everyone has got a structure.
Exactly.
Pay something.
You know, it's so obvious to us. And I think that there are lots of people who trust that, the good-naturedness of our government will come into play and they'll be able to contain themselves. But I doubt it. If you look at MITT,
I'm actually amazed. There is some video of the good professor at some CZI meeting, and he made reference to some anecdotes about how he is amazed by Zimbabweans that they are complaining, but they've got kids at elite schools abroad. I'm like, okay, which kind of club is he spending most of his time at? He's
lost touch. He's lost touch with the common man.
Exactly. And it's more or less the same story I once, discussion we had with some guy that I won't name. Rufaro was there. We're like, no, the problem that we have is we've got this US dollar that's being abused. And pretty much everyone is importing cars and wasteful and whatever. They said, Ranga, I can bet that your maid has got an ex-job. Like, dude, wait, my maid has got an ex-job. I've got an ex-job. Then I tried to explain to him, like, you know what? These people are out of touch. Then I said, no, most of the people that you see with ex-job, these are professionals. Some of them have worked for the entirety of their career around maybe 15, 20 years.
They've never owned.
They've never owned anything.
A lot of these people came from the rurals.
Exactly.
And they are still in touch with the rurals.
Exactly.
A lot of these people have relatives who stay in the high density areas. I think that they're just playing a song and dance, around you. It's theatrics. I think it's theatrics.
No, I think they've
It's not that they're out of touch.
I think they've stayed so long. I didn't want to personally. I think they've stayed so long on the other side of town or the other communities that they've actually lost touch.
No, it says a trend of kukumarufu. I don't think so. But what they try to do, they're trying to justify their positions. And then they're pandering to the gallery, right? Because the minute he says that, you start thinking, maybe it's possible. Maybe people are actually making money. And these are all anecdotal evidence. They always give anecdotal evidence, right? And they're pandering because all you need to do is to just go kurufu. And you can tell that any roofer right now, COVID changed a lot of things, but people are getting buried earlier than they usually do.
Sure.
And it's because of the financial constraints. That already tells you. People are getting buried in the urban areas because they cannot afford to take people back to their homelands, right? And you can't tell me that these policymakers, especially the Mtulis and, all these guys who came from Kumusha, they know this. Their relatives are telling them that, you know what? We would have loved to go back to Kumusha and bury our father, Kumusha, but we just cannot afford it. So we have to bury in a, council grave. It's very clear.
But the guy thinks that most of Zimbabweans have kids overseas.
Because it's a song and dance. It's a song and dance. It's a song and dance. And like I always say, the theatrics always happen with a whiskey bottle.
See.
Well, I'm sure you can. Well, it's not you, but I'm sure you can. You know exactly what happens with the whiskey bottle. But anyway, let's move on. What can business do, given a very harsh trading environment, given the drought that's upon us, given the dislocated exchange rate and monetary system? These are things that are given. Let's not try and wish them away. What could business do?
So I think one of the criticisms of business that we've had on this show and we've discussed many times is the fact that we're inward looking. Zimbabwe is a small, poor country. It's a market with only 15 million people, and yet we live in a region with more than 100 million people. And so now it's even more urgent than ever to no longer be inward looking, because you're facing a domestic market that has these significant headwinds that are going to make your life harder, that are going to make it that are going to make you poorer, right? But if you've survived this far, right, you must have some entrepreneurial, managerial skills that work. And I suspect very much that a lot of people in business, if they looked beyond our borders, would find some opportunities where their skill set and their capital can be deployed, and they can broaden their business. And just like you said with the banking arrangements outside Zimbabwe, now you can walk across to Botswana without an ID. There are more flights within the region than they've ever been in the last 20 years. So the world has become smaller. It's easier to actually engage outside of our borders. So if you've got a business that survived until today, and you're facing these headwinds, obviously in Zimbabwe you have to batten down the hatches and brace for tough times. But I think to the extent that you have any capacity to, you should also look abroad and attack these much more friendlier markets.
So I would add that they need to seek partnerships. So because when you go outside, I think the bar tends to be high. You are a foreign business, so you are exporting. You have to be performing at a certain level, and the competition, obviously, the way you are looked at, the bar actually is raised for you. Because I can't imagine a country that wants a foreign business that comes to do the mediocre, which their own local companies can do. And so when I look around, I think the competitive advantage is just not there. So it's probably the best time to.
So this is a direct message to our good friends Sekai and Chris, CZI
and
ZNCC, that maybe we need to
Look,
take missions
Yes.
across, businesses.
Yes.
Let's take them to Botswana. Let's take them to Zambia. Let's open up those trade routes, and let's get symposiums and business interactions.
Yeah, even South Africa. I mean, people tend to focus on these smaller markets outside South Africa because there's this belief that South Africa is a much more mature, much more competitive market. But I suspect that even if you get 0.1% market share in the South African market, you're probably going to be doing more business there than you do here.
Yeah, but not just that. I think you do have a point about South Africa, that if you look at where South Africa is going, higher inflation and a very dislocated business environment, you find that we are better placed to actually take advantage of the South African economy because we understand it, right? That movie, we've played that movie so many times here in Zimbabwe. And I think that we can face those headwinds. They are headwinds, but I think they're manageable. And we are actually better placed to take advantage of the market there.
I agree. Yeah. I think because we've had so much trauma and so much chopping and changing, we are much more nimble and versatile and dynamic than managers in other parts of the world where the trains run on time.
Absolutely. So we had a very interesting discussion the one time with George in Kenya, where I sort of made the, off the cuff remark. I said, you know what, when you look at the financial markets in Kenya, I think that Zimbabweans could do way better. We understand exactly where it's going. And George was of the view that, well, while that is true, there are certain nuances that you will not understand. But I was like, well, I know where the currency is going. Like if we say, where's the Kenya shilling
Where's the shilling going to be?
Where's the shilling going in 5 years' time? I think there's no Zimbabwean, even a vendor in Zimbabwe, there's no vendor in Zimbabwe who believes that the shilling will actually strengthen.
Yeah.
Right? And yet the Kenyans believe that. That's why they're buying into these government bonds. Mm-hmm. Right? That are offering a higher interest rate, like 17%, more than what the banks are giving to their customers. Right? So banks are giving to their customers lower interest rate than the government is willing to give.
Wow.
Right? That tells you the dislocation in the financial markets across Africa. And I think that Zimbabweans and the Zimbabwean financial services are better placed to take advantage of that. And he felt that, well, it's a little more nuanced than that. And we shouldn't take that very bombastic approach to financial markets. But, you're a trader. Would you bet for or against African currencies?
Well, they're called soft currencies for a reason. And look, currencies across the world, so, if you think of the 7 or 8 hard currencies, take the US dollar, for example, over a long enough period, they also
Lose value.
atrophy. I mean, like meaningful amounts of value. So over a 20-year period, for example, the US dollar loses 80% of its value in real terms. So and they are a big, very developed, mature economy. Africa, so you can imagine.
Yeah. So what we're saying, and I'll come to you, because what we're saying is we've got the infrastructure, we've got the US dollars, we've got a bit of capital, and we've got the infrastructure, we've got the entrepreneurial drive, we've got the organizations that could link us to all these business opportunities across Africa. What then do we need to do? What does business need to do 1st of January? Come 1st of January. What are they doing?
So I think they need to just explore what the other African markets can offer them.
Okay.
So maybe you go there trying to see if you can sell your product there. Maybe it starts just going there and try to sell something. And then if you are making progress in terms of sales increasing, then you may then set up an office there, and then over time start even producing or manufacturing there for the one that's on the other side. But obviously some of them, they are hamstrung by their structures, where maybe in the case of the beverages, maybe you are limited by territory or part of the franchise agreements that you can't take. You can't expect a beverage company going to set up in Zambia because there's already a licensed business already. But I think to the extent that you don't have those restrictions, it makes sense to start making inroads. And then for them to start thinking long term, because the kind of exporting that we were seeing with some of our companies was just to try and make a little bit of foreign currency over time without a long term kind of view to say we want to expand into those markets. And like I've said before, I think the best way to expand into Africa and into Africa, and you are coming from Zimbabwe, and given the perceptions and suspicions and etc., is to look for a friendly partner that you can get into business with. And I'm sure as a Zimbabwean, there's more that you can actually bring to the table, especially as African currencies and economies are given to shaking. We have seen it all, right? So,
yeah. So I think the Japanese have a saying for this, right? It's what, Kerutsu. I don't remember. My Japanese may be wrong. But it's this idea that you partner,
yes,
or, the financial services and other manufacturers, and you go into a foreign land, but with an alliance model, sort of. And I think that if you look at Zimbabwe, we do have Zimbabweans in the diaspora, Zimbabweans in Zambia, Zimbabweans in Kenya, Zimbabweans everywhere who are actually doing business. And they could your soft landing. They could actually provide you soft landing because they can provide the support, auxiliary support that you actually need. They could do your market research. They could do a whole lot more because they're already in those markets, whether in South Africa or anywhere else in the world. Then the second thing that we obviously need to do is the financial sector needs to help us to get to these foreign countries. So then they can't lend to a company that's, debt in them because of the obvious macroeconomic instability and uncertainty. But surely they should start being very friendly to people who want to go outside of them. That's the second bit. Then the third bit is, and I want to hear your views on this one, is why can't we already have manufacturing capacity, right? And where we have links with other multinationals also across Africa? Why can't we just outsource our manufacturing base? So we're like, okay, we're not in Egypt, and whoever is in Egypt, but we do have, the same parent, and we can provide the manufacturing base here in Zimbabwe. We've got the talent, we've got the machinery, and we've got the capacity. Could we do that? Could Zimbabwe be a manufacturing base?
I think that's a bad idea. This idea that can be a manufacturing hub.
I'm overstretching it.
It's a fantasy. It's a really bad idea to actually. If you had, let me put it this way, if you had offtake, right, for a factory's output, right, at a good price that gives you a good margin, right, and you had $100 million in capital, and you could put that factory anywhere you wanted in sub-Saharan Africa, would you, in your top 5 possible homes for this factory, would Zimbabwe feature?
Well, Zimbabwe features in the sense that it already has the plant. So where elsewhere, so I'll give Malawi as an example. Not that I have anything against Malawi, but that's it on top of my mind. That's the country that came to base. They don't have a manufacturing base, right? But Zimbabwe already has the capacity. So if you've got 100 million, instead of putting your 100 million in Malawi and where you need an ecosystem, so you probably, if your plant requires 100 million, you probably end up spending, multitudes, maybe 300-400 million, because you then need a supporting ecosystem around your factory. So instead of putting the capital, what you can do is you could outsource it, the manufacturing, to Zim, because Zim already has the capacity.
But you're putting so you're doing the manufacturing here, even if you're not putting $1 in new CapEx,
capital,
right? If I had the option not to, I wouldn't, because I don't know with any amount of, certainty, what part of every dollar I export out of Zim I'll be able to retain in 30 days or 60 days or any, it's just, there's no...
No, remember you're a buyer. So you're in Malawi and the manufacturing is happening in Zim.
Yes, but
Zim just exports
the factory in Zimbabwe has to wash its face.
Yes.
Right. So you've got an outlook, or you've got a business model where you're exporting. For every dollar that you export, you need to retain so many cents for the whole thing to be viable, right? And I'm saying, do you know in 30 days or 3 months or 6 months what you'll be retaining for every dollar of export?
What I'm saying, and maybe Rango, you can come in now. What I'm saying is the company in Malawi, all it requires is X amount of units. It doesn't care how you get the X amount of units. It comes to a Zimbabwean business and it says, can you produce X amount of units? How you go about it, what you do, is up to you. But all I need every month is X amount of units.
As long as we have not addressed the business environment has not been addressed, I don't think it will be successful. I believe we used to have big brands, actually, the Unilevers and all. And some of those businesses were actually manufacturing in Zimbabwe and for distribution into other parts of Southern Africa, outside of South Africa, right? And a number of them, pretty much all of them actually, they closed the shop. Why? Because of a very aggressive business environment. So you have got foreign currency shortages, you've got problems with power, problems with water supply, and then you started having interfering policymakers. We had policies like the indigenization and all these threats that sometimes come to business from time to time. So it's very difficult to actually make Zimbabwe a hub, because just imagine a situation where you have got all these countries that are depending on this supplier, and then boom, power cuts, 2 weeks of no production, or someone just comes and say they are raiding all the foreign currency that in an exporters FCA and things like that. So we just don't have a good environment. So if the environment, I think what you need is to assure the locally bred businesses that
to just forget about Zim exit plan. Just go.
Yes.
Set up the factory in Malawi. Malawi has friendlier environment, and you can then export your capital into Malawi, and you're better off there.
Absolutely.
And even a bigger part of our manufacturing was actually value addition on the agriculture side. We have lost that in terms of the throughput. So the farms are not producing enough. In fact, the majority of those ones were actually decimated. And even the horticulture that's coming up right now is actually made for the big European markets straight. There's no processing that is going to happen here. So that aspect actually is going to be a biggest problem. That's the biggest headache. We've seen it. The reason why I stand here to say we are bye-bye Zimbabwe, they're actually developing their head office in Zambia, just tells you how difficult and impossible it will be for us to have any meaningful growth in our sectors.
All right, I think as far as business is concerned, it's quite clear. You just need to leave the country and take a bit of risk, and in the next 10 years, it would actually pay off.
Maybe not totally. We don't want to sound as alarmist. So you can still keep your zero.
No, we're saying going. You continue.
Yes.
Whatever.
Yes, but when you're seeking growth, seeking opportunities,
seek your growth. The opportunities is outside of
the country. Growth is not going to be easy to find here, given the headwinds that are there. So if you actually want to grow, if 5-10 years from now you want to be a bigger business that's making more money, chances are to make that a reality, you have to, you can't be inward looking. You can't just be looking at the domestic market. You have to look at, and the world, although African politicians have been really slow about integrating and dissolving borders and that sort of thing, the world is trending in that direction. And what we've seen happen with Botswana and the IDs, I think there's going to be more of that going forward. So it's actually going to be easier to travel and do business in other parts of Africa.
So now I want to turn to individuals because the producers jumping up and down now. Let's turn to individuals. What could individuals do? People in Zimbabwe. So the young, I know we've said jump the border, but what could someone do? They've got a property, it's above 100,000. What do they do? This is the trading environment that we're in.
So I agree with the view. Anyway, we discussed it last week that if you are young and all that you have are your papers, take your papers elsewhere. And like right now, unlike maybe a few years ago, we would say, no, go there, work, build a house here in Zimbabwe. I'll say, if you get an opportunity to stay there, stay there. It's I think the environment is actually becoming more difficult and harder for upcoming professionals and all. And I think some of them actually in certain sectors, for example, the accountants have been able to get foreign jobs, or at least to here. Does it still make sense? Maybe if you can actually go there and set up base, not only are you going to enjoy, you still have your job there, but also even the quality of life.
A better lifestyle.
Yeah, because here it can only get worse. Power cuts, water problems, and the roads are getting worse and worse. If you're middle-aged, then you find yourself in a situation where the exit costs are high. But so probably the way you want to think about it is the next generation.
Your kids. Okay. So give them a good education.
Yes, the next generation.
Ensure that they're able
I would actually discourage anyone spending like 200,000 on a house in Zimbabwe, or even a figure above that, beyond your private primary residence. I think it's wasteful. I think you can get better value elsewhere, and we need to start thinking about giving the next generation a better, in fact, options.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because so what you're saying is the government threat in this budget is never going to go away. So if you start investing in these houses, unless you're corrupt and you can get around the wealth tax is going to be here and it's here to stay.
It's going to be here, and as long as the economy is also struggling, it means even the yields on that property. Should you decide to get a tenant, it won't be good.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but also you also need to think about your own quality of life, even as you think about the next generation, because now you want to ask yourself, will I be able to access a better medical healthcare in my 60s and things like that. So to the extent that you can also set base. So now I'm speaking to those that have got capacity, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were to have a chat and say, what are you gonna do with your next 100,000? If I were to hear any one of you guys saying, I want to upgrade my house, or want to buy a new one, or maybe build a $500,000 house, I'll say, Tinashe, are you crazy? I mean, you know what you can do with 200,000, 300,000. You already have got base here. So you need to set up in a place where you know that in your old age, you are able to access a good healthcare.
Okay, so if I get you correctly, there are two kinds of people in the middle age. Yes. So if you're young, it doesn't matter.
No, just go.
Just go. If you're middle age, there are two types. Yes. So there's the poor middle age, and you're saying that invest in your kids.
Invest in your kids.
It's too late for you, but it's okay. Just invest in good education for your kids, in quality of education that they can take abroad.
Exactly.
If you're middle age and you've got a bit of money, then stop investing in them. Look elsewhere. And yeah.
Look, one thing that won't change is your citizenship, your nationality. You'll still be a Zimbabwean. If things start working out well here, it's your home.
You're still able to.
Yeah. What you don't want to do is to be losing value. Wakatarisa. Like,
let's hear your thoughts on individuals. So maybe could you start with so we talked about young, middle age. How about people who've retired now? What could they do? Our mothers.
Yeah, look, I think if you're retired and you've got a home here, you don't have a lot of options, I'm afraid. But I think anybody who's active and able to learn, what I would encourage them to do is to actually to learn a bunch of new skills that are globally relevant, whether it's writing software or
this is someone above the age of 65.
No, if
remember, I said let's start with people above the age of 65. What could they do?
So people who are retired, I think their options are limited. It depends on how active you are and how much energy you have, and how many hours a day you can actually be out and about getting things done. But I think anybody younger who's got capacity to learn.
No, first let's start with the old. Are you saying it's done? Anyone above the age of 65, are you saying they're done?
Well, perhaps not 65, because people age differently. Some 65-year-olds are very sprightly, they're very active.
What's your advice to your mother?
Well, she's got sons, so she's going to be fine.
But for her, what can she do? She's got a house. What can she do? She's probably going to live longer because she's got sons. It just means that her healthcare is well taken care of. So she's going to be around for the next 25, 30 years. What can she do? What can she do given the trading environment?
There's a whole bunch of things that she can do. I mean, she's got some skills. She does do some work here and there. I think it's good for mental and emotional health. And I would encourage anybody in that position to continue doing that, whatever work and activities keep them, give their lives meaning and purpose.
Okay.
So, but in terms of actually options to and opportunities to generate income or create wealth, I think they're constrained. But the younger you are, if you're younger, if you.
So there's interesting. I thought you were going to pick up on this. There's an interesting phenomenon that's actually happening in China, where people who are older than 65, because they only had one child, they've come to wealth. So certainly their savings and everything that they have a lot more money than they required because they only raised one child.
Okay.
And what they're now doing, because the child that they raised, who's more or less our age, has their grandkid. And what they're now doing is investing in that grandkid. And suddenly the Chinese kids at this particular point in time have grandparents who are from both sides, so maternal and paternal, who are extremely wealthy, and they're just investing in their kids. And I thought that's what you're going to pick up on. That actually your best bet for your mother for the rest of her life is actually, because she's okay, is to invest in her grandkids.
Yeah, I think you missed the not so subtle difference between pensioners in China and pensioners in terms of their net worth. I think their capacity to deploy capital is a little bit different.
No, fair enough. Well, I'm talking about those that are richer and those that are poor. I think it's going to be a tough. The healthcare system is collapsing. What would you suggest they do? Someone above the ages of 65. What should they do going into the next 30 years? They will probably live longer.
If they've got Kumusha, they have to go Kumusha. I raise some Mombes, some Budzis there. And I would think that on a quality.
So rent out.
Yeah, rent out your property.
Your property if you've got property.
Yes.
Even if you don't, it's still invest Kumusha.
Yeah, invest Kumusha.
But in terms of healthcare, what's going to happen? Because Kumusha, the sort of, because you didn't grow up there. Well, you grew up there, but for the last 30, 40 years of your life, you were not there. So your body and your system is just not accustomed to that lifestyle. What would you do?
I think the lifestyle at Kumusha as you grow older is probably better, like in a Zim context.
Okay.
Given all these problems that we have, because now you imagine you are in town in your 60s or maybe early 70s. You've got this house, whether it's in Budiro, in Melbourne or whatever. You don't have power, so you don't have
a better lifestyle.
Yes, because
but you can rent out. You can just need now one room.
If you decide to do that, rent out, go Kumusha, raise some chickens. So from your rent, if you have got some bit of pension in your rent, and also have got kids.
Maybe if you've got a little bit of money, or if you have a home that's got
not Kumusha, but you could buy a little small hold just outside of Harare.
But the problem is that it doesn't make sense. People should go Kumusha because they want to be closer to their kith and kin. It's actually good for them because they are spending most of the time with their people, right? So
they're far removed.
It only works if you had
Ranga,
if you had not lost touch with your Kumusha.
So what you're saying is, Ranga, is Iwewe at 65. Look at just how sophisticated you've become. Right? And then at 65, you're saying you must go back Kumusha. You can't have a conversation with those people anymore. You're two totally different people.
But the kind of conversation that you're looking for at that age is they're mostly social.
No, I'm directing to you. Can you see yourself at 65 back in Chipinge with your kith and kin because you feel somewhat homely?
Yeah, so I think
yes. I don't want them to feel that I won't come in my 65. I'll still go back to Chipinge. I still think I can actually make a contribution there because I'm assuming that I'll have some bit of money, so I'm renting out a house or two, and my kids are off university. I'm just there raising these small livestock just for the fun of it, and because right now people are actually developing their rural homes, right? So there's electricity and piped water.
Yeah, no, that becomes your vacation home.
That's very provincial. I thought you would say something much more sophisticated. Like, if you were...
So maybe the Kumusha hasn't...
If you're an empty nester, right? Yeah. And you're 75 and you don't have the energy to work anymore and you want to retire and just take it easy, you could probably go to a place like Joburg and find... in fact...
that's the richer. So the
richer people.
The richer people, you definitely, because of your healthcare, you're better off in Canada,
you could probably go
UK, wherever, Australia.
Probably sell your home and find somebody who will give you a good deal on an annuity for as long as you're alive, they'll pay you out a certain amount of money if you give them the proceeds from the sale of your home.
Mm-hmm.
And you find
that's so.
You find
that's the elite.
You find a nice apartment on the beach somewhere.
That's the elite. We're looking at
very
the
African. It's very African.
Yeah.
Imagine
we're looking at the average.
Imagine an old man selling his property in his 70s. It just doesn't have the right vibe. So if you've got just one a residence, that's your private residence, you can't do anything.
I would say rent out, like reconfigure your home, have your own space, rent out, so you're getting a bit of income.
Maybe you can move to the backyard,
or you can
move to the cottage.
You can sell it to somebody and offer them a discount on the basis that you're going to live there for as long as you're alive.
Okay.
People have done that. Like famously, what's that guy? Hugh Hefner sold his house before he died.
I think that from our heritage is such that you need to leave an inheritance. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that would work. Unless you could do that with your kids. So your mom could do it with you and say, well, this is something that you're getting, but you kids now need to give me money. You need to pay up. But I think that, yes, I think you can reconfigure, stay in the cottage, but we're really talking about the elite. What I'm talking about is somebody right now who's living in Budiriro and they're now in their late 60s, early 70s. What could they do? And I think that the important thing that you're saying is perhaps go Kumusha, because you will have a better lifestyle. So if you're not rich, if you're poor, you're better off Kumusha and, live the last days of your life among your kith and kin. Maybe there's some value there. If you've got a bit of income, then maybe, turn to charity, actually donate your time to charity works and get out there, because I think the interaction with people will actually help you.
Good for your soul.
Good for your soul, and I still believe that invest in your grandkids. That's actually
and the intellectual type like you, just go to college.
Yeah, do your PhD.
Do your PhD and then donate your time, maybe doing a class maybe once a week, teaching at the varsity. Because obviously what you don't want is this
atrophy your mind.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
okay, with that,
no pressure.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I think we've covered a lot. It was a rabbit hole session, so that's why sometimes it takes us to places that we shouldn't really go, but we eventually end up there, which is talking about people who are in retirement and what they should do. I always say that the best way, and this is for people in the middle age and younger, is that the idea of retirement came from socialists, right, in Germany. They put 65 as the retirement age. I think then it was like 60. And the reason why they put it there is because they wanted jobs for younger people. So I think that retirement is a bad idea. The best way, what we learn from Warren Buffett and a lot of other people, is that you shouldn't retire. The best way of living the best years of your life is to just continue, and you shouldn't have a date stamped on your forehead that the minute you hit this number, then you need to be off.
Well, you only retire once when you die.
When you die, and I believe that. I think I think it was retirement age was introduced in like 1889. So it's a relatively new concept. It's over the last 100 years.
And it was 60 because life expectancy was
70.
Well, actually, it was much closer to 60. Most people didn't live to 60 at the time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think before that, the human being has lived longer and has worked until they die. There was no concept of retirement. So I think that what you probably need to do...
If you look at nature, do you see any animals that retire?
But if you are in employment, is a bit different.
Well, what we're saying is
employer will retire you. Well, so I think at a certain age, you need to think of certain vocations that you can actually activities that you can take up.
Business. Yeah, exactly. That ensure you don't
so that even as you leave formal employment, you can actually do some other things. I mean, we're just discussing about where doing a PhD and volunteer some classes.
This is what elites do, right? Because you have to have an undergrad and a master's to do a PhD.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. Actually, that's the middle class. The elites never retire. Yeah, they're still investing at 100.
You can't retire from your own business, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can't retire from your own business. That's what the elites do. But the middle class are the ones that go back to school. But the elites, they never retire.
Was working at 99.
At 99, yeah, exactly. So, and I think because retirement is unnatural, it is actually an unnatural.
And it's not good for your health.
It's not good for your health, not good for your mind, and not good for,
Even spiritually.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because God is going to ask you, so what were you doing the last 30 years?
I was just
doing absolutely nothing. What? They called it the wicked servant.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're a wicked servant. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have yourself a wonderful evening. Great weekend. Please continue to share, subscribe, and like, and comment. And we always enjoy your comments. Otherwise, have yourself a wonderful weekend. Cheers.
Cheers.